All right, we are recording. So let me just move this over here. All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Rachael Stentz-Baugher and I am with the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission. Welcome to our Women in Sports panel. We've got some really exciting guests, as you can see. And so I'm just going to do a few quick housekeeping bits and introductions, and then we'll get started. So now's the time to grab a drink, grab some snacks, and get comfortable, and we will get ready to start. So the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission's mission is to improve the economy and enrich the community by hosting sporting and competitive events. So building off of the momentum generated by the 2016 RNC, Cleveland successfully bid on and won 4 major national events. These events are collectively referred to as Velocity. Get it? We're building on that momentum, and they're being leveraged for community benefits. So those 4 events that I am referring to are the 2019 MLB All-Star Game, 2021 NFL Draft, 2022 NBA All-Star Game, and then of course the 2024 NCAA Women's Final Four. We're so proud to be part of this community of female trailblazers in sports and business, and we look forward to what's to come over the next 4 years leading into that 2024 NCAA Women's Final Four. As you know, this event, our Women in Sports panel, was initially planned in conjunction with the Mid-American Conference and the Women's Basketball Tournament in March. And unfortunately, we had to cancel that because that's right when COVID hit and everything was canceled, as I'm sure you know. This topic, though, was too important not to reschedule, and we thank you for all your patience as we figured out the best way to adjust to the new virtual norm. So a special thank you to our Velocity partners, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Mid-American Conference, as we started brainstorming for this event about 10 months ago. So we're very glad to be here, glad to have you all here, and certainly glad to have Coach and Angel here with us. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. After the intros, I'll take myself off the screen so you will see just our guests of honor. And you're all muted right now, but feel free to chat in the Q&A box. Put any questions you have in there, and Angel will be keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to incorporate those questions into the conversation. So now we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce our wonderful guests. So please welcome Cavs sideline reporter Angel Gray. She is no stranger to basketball. Gray came to Cleveland in 2018 from the WNBA's Los Angeles Sparks, where she has served as the play-by-play announcer. Gray was also a collegiate basketball player, winning 2 ACC championships and advancing to the NCAA tournament 4 years in a row with the Florida State Seminoles. She graduated in 2010 with a degree in communication and social sciences. Cleveland Cavaliers assistant coach, Lindsay Gottlieb. She is the first female coach for the Cleveland Cavaliers and the first women's college coach recruited to the NBA. Gottlieb has been a women's college basketball coach for over 20 years, most recently at Cal, where she led the Golden Bears to 7 NCAA tournament appearances and their first trip to the Final Four in 2013. Although her coaching career is often the headline, she is also a wife and a mother to a young son. So Angel and Coach, I will now turn it to you for what's sure to be a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Certainly hope so. I don't think there's any conversation I've ever been with Lindsay where it was not fun and exciting and insightful. Definitely want to say a thanks to the audience for joining us today, especially with Greater Cleveland Sports Commission for putting this on and allowing us to have this forum. I remember March 10th, or was it March 11th? We were about to leave Chicago, and I just remember in the hallway, one of our guys saying, sorry, we're going to have to cancel or postpone, that's the word we had, postpone the event that you and Lindsay were supposed to do with Mac because of COVID. So here we are, the new norm, as Rachel said, trying to understand where we fit in the scheme of things. But I do agree with Rachel, just this conversation and having it with women in sports and understanding where we are now, how we're pushing forward. That's what everybody wants to know. How can we continue to just push forward and just, still have that connection with one another? So Lindsay, as always, thank you for joining. Definitely excited about this conversation. I want to start first, a little different. Usually I just hop right into, just what everyone wants to know as far as you transitioning from the college world to the NBA. But first, how are you? How are you and the family? I mean, we haven't had Cavs basketball since March. I know there's been, we may play, we may not play. We don't know what's going on. But how are you? How have you dealt with everything?
Appreciate you asking. It's funny, I had the exact same memory, of that hallway in the United Center. We had just played the Bulls. It was right on the cusp. It was before, Rudy Gobert got diagnosed with COVID and everything shut down, but we were starting to see the impacts. And, like you said, it's post game, and I don't know, there was like a lot of food around us. I always remember that. And then they told us that the event was canceled. And I remember that we were starting to talk about NBA games with no fans. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the next day that really everything shut down. So that was 5 months ago. So relatively, as far as the world goes, we're doing great. We're very grateful to have our health. We're grateful, Patrick and I both to have our jobs and to be able to take care of Jordan and the extra time we have with family. But it's just a weird, uncertain time. I miss our team. I miss, the idea of being around a team every day. Makes you, I didn't need a reminder to know how much I love basketball and I love my job, but it's to have it be pulled, away from me. There's definitely, that's an emotional thing, and the unknowing, uncertainty of when we'll be together again is tough. But all things considered, we're grateful for the people who are putting their lives on the line and, working during this time and trying to keep everyone safe. And you just hope that the end is near of the COVID, crisis.
I tweeted that out just yesterday. I said, I wish 2020 would pick up the pace just a bit, just so we could see how things can get going, because you're right. You just miss the sense of normalcy with, being around people, covering the game, traveling with people, and just, not having that fear of, like, we know there's certain things that obviously we have to keep in the back of our minds as far as just safety and health, but this is something that has challenged us all. I remember even in that day, Lindsay, just being around the coaches, just getting information like minute by minute. We're getting off the bus and they're like, Angel, you may not even be on camera today. And it's just like, okay, well, that's interesting. But when you're talking about the adjustments, not just in that day, but adjusting as a coach and a mom and a wife in COVID, what are some of the things that you've taken away on how to continue to be better at that each day?
Gosh, I think it's being as present as you possibly can in everything that you're doing. There's definitely different aspects of it. In some ways, like, I've become closer with certain, members of the team just because the only thing you have is conversation, and the only thing you have is that virtual connection. So you make sure to do that. We have our staff Zoom meetings a couple times a week. Started out doing film sessions with Colin kind of all the time. And then it was sort of like, okay, how much film can one watch, when it's been months, but, try to talk to the guys and check in. And then obviously when the world kind of shifted on its axis a little bit with the protests around racial injustice had opened the door to different types of conversation with the guys. So you try to just be as present as you can in every moment and connect in the ways that we can. I joke with people that one of the things about going from college to the NBA that was appealing was, okay, you actually get an off season. Like at college, you just don't get an off season. In the NBA, there's an intense season and then there's an off season. I'm like, I tell people I didn't bargain for 9 or 10 months. Like that's not what I wanted. So, it's tough to be away from work in the traditional way. And at the same time, the amount of time spent, with our son, Jordan, I know that, women who have jobs like I do in coaching don't get this much time all the time with their family. So I'm appreciative of that and just navigating through it like anyone else, one day at a time and trying to be positive and make sure that I'm getting better for it. And particularly like, I'm not new to basketball, but I'm new to the NBA. So I've been able to delve into, focusing on watching more film and perfecting my craft to the best that I can.
One of the smartest coaches I know, seriously. It would be very interesting even walking in an elevator with you and you're just going off, oh, Stanford's playing and they have this Princeton offense. We got to make sure that we're watching. I'm like, oh, I might put on the game too. So just being around you, like you just want to watch more basketball. So we're talking about 82 games a season for the NBA, but still being plugged into the women's game. So that's definitely admirable, knowing your roots with NCAA women as well. My question to you is, 20 seasons that you've been around basketball, coaching basketball. Let's go back to young Lindsay just a little bit. When did you realize that was something that you wanted to do? Was there a mentor? Was it something where you were just going over the huddles and you're like, hey, I could probably take on this? When did it all start for you?
So I love sports from before I can remember. I mean, I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't like super into sports. And, you know, I've told the story before that my father was a lawyer and then became a judge, and uncles and different people in my family, aunts, like were my sister and brother now, a lot of lawyers in the family. So our dinner table conversations were often about somebody's case or about sports. And so, you know, when I was 7, 8, 9, if you asked me what I wanted to be, you know, one day I might say a senator, another day I might say a sports commentator like you, or you know, a GM. I never said coach at that age. When I was in high school, I was the nerdy kind of kid who during lunch breaks at school would go sit, you know, in my coach's office and talk to him about strategy, or I would talk to my friend's dad, you know, on the drive home from her house when we're just kind of hanging out like teenagers, saying, well, what did you think of that game on Saturday? And, you know, it wasn't just about me. I was like, could we have played so-and-so more? Could we have done this on defense? So I think I was thinking like a coach, but I didn't have a dream of being a coach until I got to college. And as a collegiate athlete, I had so many friends who were going through, you know, a similar experience, and my friends either had wildly positive or wildly negative experiences. It's, you know, most people aren't very kind of vanilla about their college experience. They either love it or hate it relative to their athletic experience. And I would say to a person, how they felt about it had a lot to do with how they felt about their coach or the team chemistry or the team, right? It wasn't class sizes. It wasn't, you know, what the dorm food was like. And so it hit me while I was in college, and I had some big life things happen while I was in college. You know, I lost my mom. I had overcome an injury my senior year of high school, but I started to think, you know, number one, I can't believe people get paid to coach basketball. Like, I love this, you know, and that would be amazing for me. But also, I think for me, what was the biggest factor was that, you know, to see the amount of impact college coaches have on young women 18 to 22 years of age when you're just going through a lot and trying to figure yourself out, that was really appealing to me. So while I was in college, I decided I wanted to become a coach and sent out letters to all kinds of people in NCAA, you know, women's basketball, and did some interviews. And the day after I graduated from Brown, I had a job offer from Syracuse, and I've been, you know, a basketball coach as my profession every single day that I've had a job. So I'm pretty fortunate with that.
I never get tired of hearing that story of how you wrote letters to every coach, and just a reminder to bet on yourself. I always think that, like, amazing, and the confidence that you had to have that I can step up and be of help to your program. So that's pretty amazing.
I mean, the coolest thing from that, and I think I've told you this, Angel, but, you know, some college coaches wrote me handwritten notes back, and Tara Vanderveer at Stanford was one of them. And she said, I don't have a job right now, Lindsay, but do this, stick with this. The women's game needs young people like you. I think it was, gosh, you know, 12 or 13 years later, I'm the head coach at Cal, and I look down the sideline and there's Tara Vanderveer coaching on the other side. I mean, it's just incredible to think that, right? And more, the lesson is more, you know, for someone like her, reaching back, you know, and encouraging a young person to get involved and, you know, get a couple wins against her at some point down the road.
I've seen a couple of those wins. Very impressive, Coach. You mentioned just reaching back, which I think is very important. You mentioned the importance of being a mentor and just being that example for young women coming up. How would you describe the sisterhood in sports collectively? I don't want to just limit it to just NBA or just NCAA basketball. What is it like, and how does that help you continue to push forward in your career?
Well, first of all, I think as the head women's basketball coach at Cal, and really all of my coaching jobs, you know, prior to coming to the NBA, the single most important aspect of my job, I felt, was, you know, positively impacting the lives of the young women that came into our program, right? I mean, you have such a hands-on impact to show them opportunities and things that they can be that they might not otherwise know, to give them an athletic, you know, scholarship to go to a great school, but then teach them how to use that, you know, for the rest of their lives, and then to be able to touch little kids at camp and all of that. And so one of the toughest things that went in my mind with jumping to the NBA is, am I going to lose that? Am I going to lose that impact, like such direct? But I ultimately thought kind of bigger. You know, I touched the 10 to 15, you know, people on our team every single year, and how many years I do it, but could I reach, you know, many, many thousands, you know, or more in a role like in the NBA? So I continue to try to have that impact, not just on women, but, hopefully on boys too, to say, just follow your dreams and impact people positively. But women within sports, I think it's a unique bond, particularly women in male dominated fields. I think, there's certain things that we only know, right? Like what it's like, and how we do have to have strength kind of in those numbers and support one another, and lift each other up and give each other opportunities and shout people out and pass the mic when it's time to pass the mic. So I think we're all really in that kind of together. And it definitely feels that way within the NBA and within sports, I think in general.
Two things popped in my mind just as you were going through that, just witnessing, just being in a camp with you. I remember right before COVID, before we went on the road, we had a girls clinic, and just seeing the amount of young women, especially the two winners for the Nike program, the Game Changers, I believe it was called, but how impressed they were with you, and just seeing the young ladies, Coach Lindsay, and wanting to be in the huddle with you and being coached by you. That goes a long way, and what they take back to their parents and how excited they are to, continue in their, journey with basketball or being in sports, I think is so cool. But then also just seeing you too with some of the most notable coaches in basketball, period, no matter the gender. But Neil Ivey, who is now one of the head coaches for Notre Dame, first African-American coach in program history, as well as Kara Lawson, in your relationship with them. When you see that and just their ability to move on and, that relationship that you built with them, how does that make you feel?
Well, first of all, it's cool, I meant to kind of change these intros. I think Rachael said, and I've been introduced before as the first woman who's been recruited from NCAA women's basketball to the NBA. Now there's a category of women who've been recruited from the NBA, to some of the best jobs in women's college basketball, which I think is cool. I'm super excited for both of them. I think careers can take a lot of different paths. And one of the things I think I bring to the Cavs and bring to the NBA is that, as you mentioned, I coached for 20 years before I got here. I was a head coach for 11 years before I got here. And hopefully those experiences bring something. And that's different than, the young female who gets her first internship in the NBA, which is awesome too, because that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. But for Kara and Niele, I think both of them, have had different paths, but they're going to be incredible head coaches at those great universities. And what I would say is unique about both of them is they're fluid in the language of basketball, right? Like if you challenge yourself in the NBA and you also know women's college basketball, and Kara, covered men's college basketball in her days as a commentator, and, Niele has a son who's a high level player. I think it speaks to the idea that if you are good at what you do and you know what you're talking about, it can translate from one kind of arena to the other in basketball. So I'm rooting for both of them to do well. I'll miss that, seeing them a couple times a year in those games, but it's fun to kind of be able to have conversations with them, and hopefully they'll bounce some ideas off me, both as first-time head coaches, and what they're going to bring from the NBA and what they're going to kind of have to adapt to in women's college basketball. So it's pretty cool to see them have success.
Absolutely. I'm happy for them as well, but we'll definitely miss seeing them on this long journey in the NBA, depending on how things move forward with the league. So let's get into the NBA. What has been the most surprising aspect of coaching in the NBA?
Oh man, surprising. I don't know if surprise is the right word, but it takes you back seeing it, just how incredibly smart these guys are relative to basketball, like how well versed they are in basketball IQ. They're so talented, but you can't be successful at this level without also studying the game. And, guys like Tristan and Delly and Kevin Love, how they're almost like finishing your sentences with scouting reports because they know, they've watched the film. They're not just relying on talent. Like that's really been cool to see how elite they are at their craft. I would say also how much they love the game and are competitive. So the NBA is interesting, right? You have 82 games. So you can't practice very long, even on the days that you have practice, right? So you might just try to get something out of them, like hit the key points, and we're like, we got to keep this short. It's got to be 45 minutes. But they'll stay in the gym for 2.5 hours after, right? And doing their own thing and shooting and whatever, because they love it. So those things have really stood out to me. Just how unbelievably receptive and progressive the guys are. They don't care, whether you're male, female. They care if you can make them better and if you care about them as human beings. I think those are the things that have stood out.
I know you get this question a lot, but is there a difference between coaching men and women?
I would say the biggest differentiator that I've seen in my experience coaching women's college basketball to the NBA is the differences are in the elite, like the pros to just, people who are good at basketball. But I would have said that between our pros at Cal, right? The ones who went on is a little different coaching the ones who went on to be WNBA players versus the others. I think that's the biggest difference. I think the things that elite players value in their coaches aren't really impacted by gender. And I would say similarly that the things that I bring to them isn't really impacted. The guys can be sensitive about different things than the women are. And then some things they can kind of get after it on the court, and then it's over. You're not having a team meeting about it. So there are some things that are different relative to the emotions of it, but not too much different in terms of the approach to the game and how you coach it.
I didn't get to ask you this because we didn't go out to the Bay this year because our away trip was cut short. But even for you, did you have any moment where you were like, wait a minute, I'm back home, but then also like, even with the Warriors, you have a really close relationship with Steve Kerr and he supports you. Is there a moment where you're sitting on the sideline, but you're also like, wow, I've been watching these guys play on TV and just, I don't want to say fandom, but just like this moment of wow, even going against Steph Curry, knowing that they came here, Draymond Green, what's that moment like for you? Or did you even go through that at all?
I mean, I definitely had sort of like pinch me moments throughout the season, right? Like it became interesting to me, like how certain things started to feel so normal. And I'm like, wait a second, I can't believe this feels normal. Like, and on the other hand, there were definitely pinch me moments, but I would say that the two pinch me sort of arenas were Madison Square Garden, because I grew up in New York, and just that I was like, okay, I can't. And I actually had coached at Madison Square Garden with Cal against UConn, but there was just something different for a Knicks game. And then being in Staples, it's funny, we played the Lakers and then the Clippers on a back-to-back, and just the feel of the Laker game was really different than the Clipper game. They do the whole arena differently. Those two arenas, I think, where I was like, wow, this is wild. There's like the celebrities in the stands and all that. With the Warriors, we played them here. We didn't get to make the trip out there. Obviously Steph being injured. There's a familiarity with them. There's just that kind of feeling of almost like not that I was on their staff, but just that familiarity of, seeing people that which I'm sure happens to other guys in the league, if they've worked at another place or if they coach someone on a team. I don't have those connections in the NBA, so it's the team I probably, had the most connections to. So there was a familiarity, but I wouldn't as much say that wow moment just because they were in our building and it kind of felt like just another game, which is interesting also.
And because you're a big deal. So you're just amongst the stars, number one, obviously. How did your family and colleagues react to your decision to go on to the NBA?
So that's a great question. Kind of when this thing was developing, there were so few people I could talk to about it, simply because of the respect for my people at Cal, right? Like you can't be a college coach and be thinking about other jobs or, potentially. So there was just no one that I could really, my circle was very small in terms of talking about it, but I am really fortunate to have a family that thinks bigger than just today, tomorrow. They think bigger than salary. They think bigger than status. It's always about kind of what's going to make me happy, and also what is the bigger picture. So I remember when I was kind of struggling, the Cavs came with this really appealing situation. It was, people had started to talk about women in the NBA, and even the conversations with me were more like, hey, Lindsay, where do you think this is going? Like 10 years from now, what do you think it's going to look like? Or do you have a young person who might want to intern? But Kobe and the Cavs sort of came with, no, we see your value now, and this is how we want you to add here. And it was really different than other conversations. And so like once it started to get hard, then I knew it was real, because I knew that it was something I really might want to do. And my husband said it, but then of course you struggle with, how do I leave these kids at Cal, and how do I leave what I'm doing? And my husband, Patrick, said, I think it comes down to, what do you want your legacy to be? And like, that was really helpful. My oldest sister, Chris, who's a professor at NYU Law School, who like doesn't really know anything about sports, is always great for me to bounce things off, because she starts to, just ask questions that challenge me in a way that get me down to the root of what I think I really want, even if it's scary. So long story, everyone was really supportive. I actually talked to one coach in women's college basketball who happens to be a male, who was not in direct kind of competition with me. So I confided in him, and he said, actually, Lindsay, it has to be you. Like, you're the one who has to do this. This is going to change it for a lot of people. And I thought that was interesting. And then once the news broke, everyone was really supportive. I will say my players at Cal were unbelievably supportive. I think they were sad, I think they were shocked, but, I told them part of the reason, as much as it hurts me to leave you, part of the reason I'm doing this is so, Archer, who's our complete math whiz, like, so that if you want to be a GM, like in the NBA, you have more opportunities. Or if someone else wants to be a reporter, like now you all know someone in the NBA. This is how the old boys network always works. People know someone who knows someone. Well, now you know someone in the NBA, and they were incredibly supportive. I do think some people in women's college basketball were surprised and I don't know, hurt. Like, I don't think people want necessarily to think women's college basketball is a less than, and that the race is to get to something else. Which is also why I'm really trying to keep those ties in women's college basketball, because I think it's important to kind of have those connections. But ultimately, everyone, was really supportive and interested and happy and, want to know what it's like and all that kind of thing.
I think just with you raising or making the statement with, leaving, the women's game and going to the NBA because you presume that it's the next step up. But honestly, it's just the best job that's presented to you at the time. And when you're thinking of even the moves that have happened, we just mentioned, Livy and then Kara Lawson, those are great jobs for them at that point. So it's not that,
Right.
NBA is the all. It's the fact that you're getting better, in a sense, like opportunities for yourself and what that looks like for your career.
Yeah. And also for other people, do we want to like be totally real, Angel? We haven't hit on this at all, but let's be real, right? Any men's Power 5 head coach would not leave to go to the NBA to be an assistant coach unless they were about to get fired or about to get investigated for something, right? It just wouldn't happen. And so some people are like, well, why are you going to leave a head coaching job to go, almost like, is it a high enough position kind of thing? And my feeling is someone had to do, what I did, leave a head coaching job and go be successful in the NBA, whatever success looks like. I don't know what my future is going to hold. So that at some point, if there is a women's college basketball coach who is successful, that someone says, well, why, if we're going to look at a college coach, why don't you try and find the best person? That might be a female college coach, or it might be a male college coach, if that makes sense, right? Like we have to see people doing things to go, oh, maybe there is fluidity between. And I'm not saying it's not because of me that Kara or Neil got hired the other way, but I think the more people kind of can be successful in multiple realms, the more it opens people's eyes to, you don't have to be in a box when it comes to basketball. No one put, Billy Donovan in a box and said, you're only the coach of Florida. No, but Brad Stevens in a box and said, you're only the Butler coach. They gave them opportunities. And you know what? The leap from college to the pros is hard and it's weird and it's not the right fit for everyone. We've seen that, right? But I think if it's going to be the fit for some people, it shouldn't be predicated on male or female. And that's where I think, for me personally, I did some amazing things at Cal. It was an unbelievable place, and I could have stayed there a long time. But the challenge of pivoting and going to the league that is the best professional sports league, in the country, and the best, players of the sport I love, and a new challenge for me, that was the right thing. Professionally, I think I'm a better coach than I was 10 months ago. I'm better for what I'm doing, and I'm better if I ever did something else. But also, I think maybe it expands the pool of thinking when it comes to the NBA and who could be a successful candidate for any job, in the NBA.
Right. I'm glad we touched on that, because a lot of people will occasionally say, oh, they're poaching all of our good talent. And it's like, no, this is, like you said, just a challenge for your career. And who knows where you may end up moving forward. I don't know a lot of people that would turn down a head coaching opportunity in a Power 5 school like Duke or Notre Dame. So definitely really awesome to see how everyone's, journey, where that leads them. So,
Right.
There has been a lot of talk about how women's NCAA teams are predominantly led by women, but WNBA and NBA teams are still primarily led by men. Why do you think that is, and do you see a shift coming anytime soon?
Well, first of all, let's just also say this: not enough women's NCAA teams are led by women. Mm-hmm. One of the sort of less publicized, outcomes of Title IX is that it's led to less women coaching women and more men because there's more money in it. You know, a lot of my best friends are men coaching women's basketball. So I'm not anti-men coaching, and especially the ones who have been in it, you know, and want to do it and love the game and work their way up. But I do think, you know, we should make sure that there are women in positions of power, even in women's basketball at every level. But certainly the WNBA is more men than women coaching. And obviously the NBA, you know, have no female head coaches yet. Is a change coming out? You know, I don't know. I think that, I think that obviously Adam Silver has been really vocal about the NBA, and that, you know, in his league office and in front offices and on the benches, that it's just not going to be as strong as it can be if we discount, you know, 50% of the population, you know, and he's been really vocal that women can just add to the league. And so I think that women are here to stay in the NBA, whatever positions that is, you know, who knows, right? I don't think there's a timetable on that. And I think the WNBA, you hope that the league grows such that it's an enticing spot for college women's coaches if they want to try the pro lifestyle or do the pro thing. Right now, as you know, women's college coaches make more money than the WNBA. There's more stability. There's that kind of thing. So as the league grows, I think maybe we'll see more of the best, you know, women's college coaches get involved. But, you know, you would hope that that league, which is so, you know, empowering of diversity and, you know, progressive in many ways, you would hope that ownership says, you know, can we find the most qualified, you know, women to be head coaches in this league, you know, first and foremost, and get those numbers up a little bit.
Well said. Thank you, Lindsay. How do you think coaching in the NBA will affect your son's perspective in women's?
Well, I guess he's learned that men play basketball too. The first, you know, 2.5 years of his life, it was all women. I mean, I just hope that he's exposed to a lot of interesting things, and we're able to, you know, help him understand that, you know, he gets to do a lot of cool things and use that to just expand, you know, his own growth as he gets older. He was around the team a ton at Cal and loved those young women, and they were great with him. And, you know, he saw strong, powerful women, and, you know, now he's around these guys who are awesome. And, you know, you hope that's positive, a positive influence on him as well. You know, but we like him to be connected to the community. We like him to have experiences. And these guys have been great with him. The one story I'll tell, which I think everyone thinks is so funny. So he's going to start pre-primary school he's supposed to start this fall. We'll see how that goes. But, you know, it was a school where you have to bring your child in to, I don't want to say it's an interview, but like do like a play group so they can meet him. And so they advise you to tell your child that they're just going to, you know, their school to meet some new friends or go with their friends, you know, to school. And so he woke up that morning. It was middle of the season, and we didn't have anything until later that day. So I was going to take him myself. And I said, "Hey, Jordan, we're going to your school today. And, you know, your friends are going to be there. You're going to meet some friends." And he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Colin and Darius are going to be there?" He's the only kid who thinks the starting backcourt for the Cavs, you know, is going to be at his 3-year-old pre-primary school meeting. I said, "No, buddy, you're going to see Colin and Darius later. They're not going to be at your school, man. They're not, you know, they're not your school friends." And so I thought that was funny. But yeah, to him, they're just regular guys, and it's cool to see him kind of experience some of this.
You just never know, though, with Jordan, because everyone demands his attention there. They're like, I want to be around Jordan. And you never know with the tight-knit group that you guys have with, you know, Colin and Darius, they just may show up to class one day. Who knows, right?
Our Cal players were always like at his birthday party, you know, his birthday parties. And I was like, people in the park, we had a birthday party in the park, people were like, who are all these, like, you know, 6-foot-tall women hanging out in the playground with, you know, the 2-year-olds? But yeah, Jordan definitely has a way. The other time I almost, you know, I love my son. I almost had to disown him. You know, you were at the game in Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse when James Harden scored 55 points against us. It was a close game. You know, we would have won if we'd held James to 45, let's say. So it's after the game, and we're like, you know, my son Jordan had been at the game, and our nanny actually had taken him home. You know, I was going to put him to bed before I got there. We had a whole system. And sure enough, she texts me 20 minutes after they leave or whatever. And it's a picture of James Harden holding Jordan. And they're both smiling at the camera. I'm like, this guy's trolling me. He just scored 55 on us, and now he's hanging out with my son, by the team bus. So I don't know how that picture happened, but it was pretty funny.
That is epic. And trust me, he's dropped probably more on other people too. So
yes.
we'll just let that stay in the back of our minds.
Yeah.
What's your favorite moment of the season? I know that it's come to an end, and it took us some time to actually say, okay, the season is done. Didn't end the way we wanted to, but this was your first season in the books.
Yeah.
What was one of your favorite moments?
I think just the way that the team came together after All-Star break. We'd gone through a coaching change, which is not easy. There had been some ups and downs, but to see them rally, together, we had a couple, really good wins after All-Star break. I'd say the come from behind win against Miami at home. But just anytime they celebrated in the locker room after, anytime you saw the growth, when you have a team that's in a development mode, you sometimes have to see the growth in baby steps or in things that are not just on the scoreboard. So there were a number of times just seeing people, kind of come together. But I would say the way that the team felt right at the end, which is, a bummer for us, obviously, that it ended as soon as it did.
When you mentioned that being one of your favorite things in the season, just seeing how everything comes together, how can you even express what that means for you in your first year, how the team, even through all the adversity, coaching staff onto the team, how does that make you feel just with the confidence moving forward into the next year?
Yeah, I mean, this obviously kind of where we are now is tough because this is about growth here. And, there's 22 teams in Orlando, and we're kind of bummed not to be in that because it's just time together and growth and growing. But as a group, I think we've really kind of stuck to the mantra, we have to make the best of it, and we have to not let anything deter our growth. I think we feel good about where we are. I mean, JB is incredible. He's an unbelievable basketball mind, but also I think the right fit for this team in Cleveland, his ability to connect with people and feel like there's, stability. We've got a great young core, and then veterans, to kind of work with them. So we feel like it's the spot where, we know we need to get better. We know we need to take the next step, but the feel around the guys and that, their willingness and desire to do that is something special. We just want to, get back to it at some point.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of trivia for this next question for those that do know that she spent some time at Richmond as a coach. But what was your experience like to be able to watch your former players at the University of Richmond coach against each other as head coaches?
Very well, shout out to the MAC conference. I know this original panel was going to be in conjunction. So when I was 24 to about 27, I was the assistant at Richmond. And that to me was like my quote unquote big break job because Joanne Boyle was an assistant at Duke. She took the head job at Richmond and brought me along with her. So I was 24 years old and I had to get a note from the athletic director to be able to rent a car. So I didn't have to pay the, under 25, whatever fee. So that was, and yet Joanne really helped me kind of establish the program with her and sort of said, this is our thing, let's get it done. So I had a wonderful experience at Richmond. Well, I had two guards at the University of Richmond that are now head coaches in the MAC. Melissa Dimmick, now Jackson, actually married one of our male practice players. So I know her husband really well. She's the head coach at Akron. And then Deanna Hendricks, who is famous for I had to do the longest home visit in the history of home visits. Angel, you were recruited, I think I stayed in Kokomo, Indiana for like 15 hours. I went to her Powder Puff football game. We went home, we had dinner. Then the other relatives came over. I'm like, we better get this kid, which we did. But she's now the head coach at Miami of Ohio. So I drove down one night. It was like an off night where we didn't have a game. And so people were like, you're going to another game when we don't have a game and there's 8-2. But to me, that's why you coach in college, to see your players achieve their dreams, whether that's getting drafted to a pro league, whether it's going to law school, whether it's becoming a coach. So to see two young coaches on the sideline that I had coached do their thing was really gratifying. It's funny how they do grow up, you remember them as freshmen, sophomores, but I was really proud to see them both being strong women, coaching in the MAC and leading their teams. It was cool.
Talk about small world. It's so interesting because I just remember with Deanna Hendricks on my visit to Richmond, and she was a part of my visit to Richmond.
But that was after we were gone?
Yes, so you were gone, and then going back to Richmond because I believe it was under Mike Schaefer at the time I went under him. And then to go on to Final Fours and to see her and to support her. I think we met in Mexico again. She was like, yeah, I remember the visit, going to speak at her team when she was a head coach at High Point, and now she's back in the MAC and here. So obviously those relationships are a big deal, and hopefully we can get to a game whenever that may be to support them.
That's awesome.
Are there any coaches that have been an inspiration to you in your coaching journey? You hit on a couple of them with Joanne,
Right.
but anybody else that has pretty much left those footprints for you as far as guidance and helped you to get to where you are today?
Yep. I mean, so Joanne Boyle had the biggest impact on my career. Again, she hired me as a 24-year-old. The way that she empowered me kind of just informed the rest of my career. She said, let's do this together. And she let me, run the offense. And then she let me coach the post players and coach the guards and do defense. Like I felt like I was, as ready as I could be to be a head coach when I finally got a head coaching job, because of the way that she had mentored me, which is how I tried to, be with my assistants going forward. So in the game, she's probably the most influential, but, then you form friendships with other people, across the leagues and stuff. And in Pac-12 women's basketball, the level of coaching in that league is unbelievable. So I learned a ton from Tara and Charlie Turner-Thorne and, some really Corey Close, like they're just some really good colleagues I had. And then I always just spread myself to different areas. So the relationship with Steve Kerr became big when, he would let me come to practice at any point, or, from afar, I watched people like Doc Rivers, or even, Pete Carroll with the Seahawks, and he was doing some interesting, innovative things. And so just the chance to kind of pull from other people, I would say, is something that that I really prided myself on. And then ended up being able to have relationships with someone like Gino or someone like Muffet to call them up and ask, hey, what do you think about this or that? So I've been very fortunate to be able to pick the brains of a lot of smart people.
Shout out to Corey Close at UCLA, definitely one of my mentors, a big reason why I get to live out my dreams of being in communications today, working with her team just a bit. So definitely some minds there that I could say I agree with you. To pick their brains and to be around them is pretty awesome. I have one more question for you before I go to the audience, and I can see here we have a few questions for the Q&A. And if you do have a question, just make sure you're putting it in there now, because I'm going to get to it, and hopefully I get to all of them. So Lindsay, the Women's Final Four is coming to Cleveland in 2024. Woo-hoo! I know I'm really excited about this. We've both had experience playing in the NCAA tournament. You went a little bit further than I did and could experience, and you made it to the Final Four. What impact does the Women's Final Four have on players, coaches, and the host community? How can Cleveland maximize that impact and make it an even more powerful experience, since you have so much?
Yeah, so first of all, shout out to Cleveland and the Cleveland Greater Sports Commission. I mean, I think it's amazing how this community embraces sports and has turned, into the hotbed of sporting events. I think it's unbelievable. I found out when I got the job here that, Cleveland was about to host a Final Four in a couple of years, which is really exciting. So for those who aren't kind of right in women or right in college basketball, I should say, the Final Four is the culmination of the whole season. So it's the four teams and their fan bases, which is awesome. It's like a big, party for a weekend and the best of women's college basketball, but it's also where coaches from every single university can converge, and it's the coaching clinic and networking. And so you really get kind of everyone who loves women's college basketball, who's invested in it, in one place. So my family and I, we love Cleveland. I mean, you don't usually move from the Bay Area and say, this place is unbelievable, but we love it. We think it's cultured and great for sports and so many cool things to do. So I'm personally excited to kind of show off our city to my women's basketball people. But I think it can be really good for the community also to, show off our best things, our food and our culture and our, love of sports. So I think it's great. And I also would encourage people who are not traditional women's basketball fans to go to the open practices, to go to the games, to take a friend and buy a ticket, to take a young girl or a young boy, because it really is high level basketball, and it's the time of their lives for those young women. I mean, I know the team I took to the Final Four, we'll never forget that moment. And so it's cool that Cleveland's going to be a part of that.
Fantastic. I can't wait. Hopefully, Honestly, Final Four is just amazing. You always circle it on the calendar. Like you said, it's like one big reunion. We always talk about how it's a tight-knit family. So it's like getting to catch up with everyone and experience the culture of the city and leave with bragging rights to be like, yeah, Cleveland did that, didn't they? Yeah. So
Exactly.
hopefully 2024 can get here sooner than later. I'll go to some of the questions we have here. I'll try and condense it just a little bit. But Dennis, and I don't want to butcher the last name, overall, he's just asking, Florida keeps talking about the teams that aren't, playing for the title game. How do you feel about your team being left out, but then also the youth that you have and the competitive edge that may create for other teams? What are you wanting to see? Is there another method to get those guys back there? Anything that can be beneficial for your team, especially with the youth there now?
I mean, so look, we understand the business aspect of it, and the NBA they've done a great job with the bubble and trying to maximize getting some regular season games, but getting onto the playoffs. So we didn't like the 22 number, but we understood. But as one of the other 8 teams, there is real loss for us in terms of the practices together and the games together. So we're just trying to make the best of what we're allowed to do with that. So at some point we will be allowed to get together in our market and get it, we're not gonna have to wait until December or January or whenever the season starts and just say, what's up guys, ready to go? Like, we're gonna get some time. And so, our conversations, with our coaching staff and our front office has been, how do we make up for some of that, in terms of the development of the young guys, the team chemistry. So we're aware, to answer, the question. I don't think the NBA owes us anything other than hopefully some time together. And then that's up to us to maximize, we know we need the growth. We know we need the reps. We got to make up for it however we can. And we need to get to a point where we're not left out of the party next time. Not that there's going to be another pandemic, but whatever that party is, playoffs or whatever, that's where we want to get to.
Absolutely. This one coming from Marla, what was the biggest adjustment in your jump to the NBA, and how did it feel to move up to the front of bench after Coach Beilein's departure? Something you might have done differently?
So the biggest adjustment was, I think, the rhythm and the schedule. I coached women's college basketball for 20 years. And so I knew just the times of the year and the cadence and when you start prepping for a game and, when you back off them and when you push them. And then obviously the NBA cadence is a little bit different. So I think the biggest adjustment was just, for example, if it's your scout, you don't present the scout to the guys until the day of the game, that morning shoot around or right at the game. Whereas, if we were playing UCLA on a Friday night, we'd start talking about UCLA with our team on Tuesday or Wednesday. So adjusting to those rhythms, I think, was the biggest difference. Not too much else. I didn't come to the NBA with I have to sit in this seat. I have to be on the front bench. I have to be one seat over here. And to be honest, I think that's helped me. I don't want to say I've gotten over myself, but I'm at the point in my career where it's not a climb. I'm not, trying to prove myself or you have standards for yourself, but at different points in your career, you're trying to achieve something. So I actually think I'm a benefit to JB and to the organization because, hey, I just want to add value. Mm-hmm. I will say though, that sitting, on the front from on the back, like it's literally a different perspective. And so when I first became a head coach, I remember the moment when the game slowed down and I felt like I was in control, not following up to the pace of it. And I had a similar feeling with, the front bench of, you feel the rhythm of it a little bit differently. And, I mentioned the IQ and sort of the brilliance of these players. Well, when I moved to the front was kind of when, when we got Andre Drummond as well. And so Tristan was trying to come off the bench. So I sat next to Tristan every time, and Darius sometimes when he was injured, and to be able to talk the game with those two guys as it's happening, or to be able to get the real-time feedback when the guys come out, I think was good for me, and it was good for them, I think. So that's probably the biggest thing. And if I would do anything different, I don't know, I think you get better as you go. Maybe I'd be a little less nervous, coming in, but life is
I was
life,
excited to see that. That's awesome. And congratulations again. I want to read this whole thing because I agree with Ryan completely. Love how much you have integrated yourself into the community in such a short time frame, Lindsay. Thank you for that and for participating in today's discussion. Obviously, the Cavs are very progressive, but curious if you've ever experienced coaches' cultures where the fixed that's the way we've always done it mindset has been dominating. How have you worked through that? I hope I read that with.
Yeah. I mean, I can actually look at it at the same time. So that's good. Hi, Ryan. So the Cavs are very progressive. They've made every effort in every way. They clearly weren't just like checking a box and saying, oh, we wanted a female coach or something. This has been about, me coming here and them making it inclusive, and everything from knocking down a wall and making me a locker room and the practice facility to try and, integrate me truly. But when there's never been a female on the coaching staff before, sometimes you just have to point something out. It's something as small as, these are the shirts that we need to order, right? To this works better for me, like being vocal on things where, I don't shy away from being different. I think that's it's one thing to, be invited kind of to the table. It's another thing to be invited there and have to pretend that you're just like everybody else. And so I think I've learned to be vocal on things where they just, it hasn't been done before, so you don't know it yet. But within our organization, their forethought has been unbelievable. Where you run into those type of things, I've told you, Angel, this story a couple of times, is just on the road, it varies arena to arena how well set up they are for a female assistant coach on the road. I can tell you the bad stories and I can tell you the great stories, but without fail on the road, I would get asked kind of behind the scenes getting onto the court for my credential, 2 or 3 times a game, when the male assistants would never get asked, just simply because the ushers, that I couldn't possibly be someone who belongs on the court. And it was always, kind of very heartwarming to see how kind of defensive the other coaches and our players got. No, she belongs here. She doesn't. I was like, I never even got a credential. What are you talking about? So those are the things I think where just mindsets need to change, the more that it becomes the norm to see women, with NBA teams.
Absolutely. Thank you for your hand in changing that. I bet, next year when we step on the court, they'll definitely know Coach Lindsay has his place here. To both of us, do you have any interest in lobbying for Cleveland to get a WNBA team back into Cleveland? Because I remember they did have a team, and I know a couple of people that did play for that franchise. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm game, but what do you think?
Yep, the Cleveland Rockers, they were one of the original teams. I think it's time for the WNBA to expand from a talent perspective. There are so many. I mean, I'm talking like conference players of the year and amazing players that can't make a team. The WNBA is the hardest. There's 144 spots. It's wild. It's hard to make a team. So I think talent-wise, there's room for expansion. Obviously, the business model has to be there. Just from being in the Bay for so long, I actually think the Bay Area would be a great spot for a team because they love women's college basketball and there's no team. I think if Cleveland, wanted a team and could support a team, I think Ohio is huge for girls basketball. I'd love to see the WNBA get one more team in the East and one more team in the West. I know there's been talk about Toronto and the Bay, but I always say about Cleveland, why not? But it'd have to be some owners who are invested in it and some really good kind of community engagement done to have it done right.
Absolutely. I'm game. Lindsay, I was told to tell you that Luke Gonzalez is a huge fan. So now that you know that, the question is, how do you deal with the stress in a basketball game or a big game coming up? Or is this just something where this is another game day, another, thing to get through? Like, how do you deal with the balance of things and not getting too high, too low?
Well, I'm going to let you all in on a big secret. It's more stressful when you're the head coach. There's no question about that. So that's one thing I think, being an assistant now, I try to do everything I can to take things off JB's plate where I can, because nobody can know what it feels like to be in that seat if you're not the one in that seat. So what I do in general with stress and stuff, you have to, as a coach, it's a lifestyle job. It can take over. You have to make time for the things that keep you healthy. So it's a run for me. It's reading. It's spending time with my family when we're not on the road. You really have to practice some self-care with that. And then I always found I kind of gave myself time when I was at Cal as the head coach. If we lost a tough game, you watch the film, you learn from it. you spend a short amount of time like grieving it, whatever that looks like, and then you have to craft the messages for the team and move on. Like that's part of the rhythm of it, and that helps you deal with the stress of it because you're leading other people. And so to me, that's always my mindset. Like, what does KP need to hear from me? What does Colin need to hear from me? It's not about me and my stress. It's how are we getting better? What am I bringing to the table?
Yeah. Absolutely. We have 2 more questions. Hopefully we can get through them before the end of it, but quickly, for men individually and collectively, what are your recommendations for how to best promote, support women and to create more opportunities in both of your fields as well as other industries in general?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Rob. Men tend to be the ones in decision-making positions of power. So I think actively promoting the concept of looking for qualified women. We all know that women just aren't as likely to raise their hand. They're not as likely to say, hey, I'm qualified. They're not as likely to say, look at me, but it doesn't mean that they're not able. I had a number of people in the NBA say to me, well, I didn't know you wanted to coach in the NBA. And I kind of say, well, I didn't know I wanted to until they came to me with this amazing job. You could have come and said, hey, this is, so I do think at times, men have to be willing to think outside the box and say, is my organization diverse enough? Do I have all perspectives? And reach out and empower women. I also think being mentors. I think men can be mentors to women. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to, understand everything. There are some differences, but I think men just, in the right ways, mentoring women, I think is really powerful too.
Cool. Clip it off and put it on Twitter. That's perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. Last question from, I hope I'm not saying this wrong, Brianna Finch. What are some of the philosophical or tactical concepts that have changed or evolved for you as a coach going from college to NBA?
Well, that's interesting. Hi, Brianna. I think I owe you a phone call to talk about player development. So I will do that. But so people ask me a lot, like if I went back to college basketball, what would I bring? What would I do differently? So there's no question the NBA is the absolute best at player development, partly because the staffs are so big, people are so smart, you have so many analytical things. So I do think what I've learned in the NBA is like just the really attention to detail on breaking down individual players' games. You have the time to do it. And so I think I've learned a lot about player development, just to actually grow the individual's game, not just grow the scheme or their ability to run a play or run an offense. I also think just the simplicity of the NBA. There's a lot of just kind of simple sets, but it's spaced really well. The timing is good. The players are good. So I think I've learned just in terms of, offensive philosophy, kind of figuring out what suits your team best and then letting them run with it and then making adjustments based on spacing, and things like that. There's so much, you just get to devote a lot more time to X's and O's in the NBA than you did in college. So I think I've learned a lot more than that as well, but just kind of synthesizing it all and keeping my notebooks and making sure I'm taking in as much as I can. And also, adding some thoughts and concepts when it's appropriate.
Perfect. Lindsay, thank you so much. Rachel, because this is our time to wrap up. Seriously, thank you so much for your time, Lindsay. I always walk away learning something new from our conversation. So I hope the audience enjoyed that. Hope you guys can walk away with something and continue to promote the game and just understand the importance of women and diversity in the league. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Angel. You're a pro. You always make it fun.
I just want to echo those words, Angel. You both were fantastic. What a great opportunity to hear from you both. I feel like we could keep on going for another hour if we had the time. So maybe we'll do it again sometime. But we just wanted to thank you both for joining the Women in Sports panel presented by the Greater Cleveland Sports Commission. And Greater Cleveland Sports Commission and Velocity will be hosting lots of cool events over the next several years in conjunction with those big national events that we're hosting. So keep an eye out for other community-based programming brought to you by Velocity. So thank you both again. Can't wait for the Women's Final Four in 2024. And good luck to the Cavs.
Thanks so much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.